Hi everyone. So basically I wanted to start a series of short videos and reels and so on the concept of homeschooling. I've been homeschooling my daughter who is now 11 throughout her life. She briefly went to two schools, 6 months here, 4 months there, because we were very open, my partner and I, being her primary parent, I would say, had always been very open with her about the idea that if she ever was curious about school, then we would send her. So we did send her when she was curious, and when we felt that I needed a little more time to do certain things for myself. She went, and it was a learning experience because we realized that what homeschooling was able to accomplish for her on almost on a daily basis, I would say. And I'll come to this in a bit, because people think when I say daily basis, because that it's packed with a lot of things and so on. It's probably the opposite. What it was able to do for us and for her as a family, we realized that school would not ever be able to accomplish that. Now, I want to start this series by introducing myself and also by saying something very clearly, that I'm not doing anything that I believe is anti-school. I do believe school is very important for many people. There's a reason why it's there, and there's a history to it, and it's linked to industrialization and corporatization of the world and so on. And I will come to that in one of my talks, hopefully. And it's important to understand the history of what we do in order to take the right decision regarding it. So I will talk a little bit about the history of schooling and the brief history of unschooling, or the longer history of unschooling rather. But just to put out there, this is not school versus no school and so on. It is about what I believe learning should look like, and something that I share with a lot of other educators and parents around this country and globally. So first, I'm a parent to a wonderful young girl. I am a very involved parent, and I was, I would say, lucky enough to have the space to raise her. After the first few months of my life, I raised her as a single parent for a long time before I met my current partner, and I was lucky and fortunate enough, and maybe also steered the ship in that direction of having the luxury to raise her with love, introspection, joy, and just respecting the child for who she is, which is at the heart of what I think all education, especially in the younger and primary years, but really all education always should be about. All education should be about the individual, the child, their needs, their desires, their very, very complex situation, whether it is emotional, affective, economic, cultural, social, whatever, but also primarily understanding who the child is from within. Do they like to invent things? Do they like to ask questions? Do they like to, do they prefer solitude? Do they like longer hours of work or shorter hours of work? Do they like to work in the evenings or in the mornings? There's just so much. Do they prefer learning with color, or do they prefer learning with their hands? And do they prefer learning by writing or by watching and speaking and so on? For this reason, I think it's not possible sometimes for schools to entirely focus on the individual, because it requires a lot of individual focus and so on. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to just tell you why this was important to me as a parent, but also as an educator. So I have spent years in the field of higher education. I'm a professor of English. I have taught literature in English with several gaps and so on for over 20 years in the best institutions in the country, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the process. I have learned so much, right? And I continue to do so. There are certain things that certain facts about children that one also, and young people, because they're not children anymore, at the university level, at the college level, about young people that one also picks up while teaching. And this has also shaped what I believe about education today, right? So I started by being a professor of guest lecturer at that point at college at Delhi University, way back when I was doing my MPhil in English literature. Then from there on I went on to teach at a lot of the North Campus colleges, Miranda House College, Guru Tegh Bahadur Khalsa College, before I got a permanent professorship at Kirorimal College. Wonderful, wonderful spaces, all of them. And I taught for about 4.5 years before I moved out of Delhi. And then I taught at a Bombay College, Jai Hind College, for a year. And while I was doing that in both Delhi and in Bombay, I was also doing cooperative teaching at Delhi University at the master's level for English literature, and same in Bombay as well. I was teaching at once in a while I would take a few refresher courses or was invited to take a few guest lectures at Mumbai University for the master students, as well as teaching master students at SNDT University as visiting faculty regularly. So that's in short, and through that there was also winning the Junior Research Fellowship and pursuing my MPhil and PhD and so on, and also a lot of several things that happened in my personal life, right, that also made the journey go in the direction that it went. Alongside that, I was also writing, and I was also an artist and so on, and I became a parent. I think the personal and the professional, and in feminism we say the personal is the political, and I've always believed that they really came together for me to understand what it is that children, young people, students need from us, and how we need to think about education as something that doesn't mold and shape individuals, but rather respects them for who they are, right, and encourages them to believe in themselves and their skills and their natural abilities, to hone them to the best abilities so that they can become independent thinkers and doers and respect the interdependence of the world that we live in, right? So individual and community, right? These are so important, two very important factors when it comes to education, the individual and the community, and how the two, independence and interdependence, are actually connected. So that's my educational journey as well as my personal journey in short. So when my daughter was born, it was a very difficult marriage that I was in, and then, as I told you, I became a single parent, and it was very clear to me that here's an opportunity for me to be able to provide something very, very unique to this child that I may not have, let's say, experienced growing up, or I may have had the advantage of picking up as an educator, especially at Delhi University and then later at Mumbai University, that I may be able to, as an artist and a writer as well, as I may be able to pass on to my child. But I would say primarily it was just love speaking. And today too, when I homeschool my child, and I think this is true of a lot of other people, homeschooling, unschooling, whatever, and regular schooling, when they really care about their child's growth and education, right? Unschooling just becomes a way of life. It's just an extension of loving and caring for your children. Some people will not have the luxury, right? It's a privilege, of course. It's a class-based privilege and so on, to unschool. But I want to come to that also, because I think there are a lot of myths around how unschooling is a very, very, upmarket thing and so on. It need not be. In fact, my learnings of unschooling have a lot to do with watching a lot of the laboring class who, for instance, take their children along with them wherever they go. And when my daughter was very young, she's sitting right next to me actually, when she was very young, I used to often think, like, I used to take her wherever I went, and I used to think, but that's education, right? She's coming with me to the vegetable market, she's coming with me book shopping, she's coming outside with me if I'm being invited to a literature festival or to the university that I'm teaching at. She is learning by doing, and it's really a natural process for the parent in their personal and professional role to also be attached to the child, and the child to be attached to the parent physically and otherwise, and learn together in a natural process. Why should they be severed from the person that not only created them or adopted and brought them into this world, really the person who has their best interest at heart? Why should they be severed from them and be taken into a different space where those who feel, let's say, that they know better than you do for your child can teach, right? Why could we not think of a system where if people choose, and I'm saying it's a choice, definitely, there's no right or wrong here, but if people choose, and they should have the right to choose, to have their children with them, why can't they come along with them to their place of work, wherever they are, and learn in that way? Now, I want to start today's, I've already started really, but I want to end, I think, today's talk focusing on the aspect of love, which is very important, but also second, autonomy. The reason I think that we are witnessing the kind of problems that we are witnessing in the world today is because countries and individuals, especially countries and their leaders, have sold off autonomy, right? Economic autonomy, financial autonomy. This is so important in order for you to act in a conscionable manner. But if you have created a situation as an individual, as a country, or just as an institution or whatever, to get all your funds from one particular place, or you've entered into trade agreements that are not empowering to both parties, that are not codependent or interdependent rather, but have created a situation of debt and slavery, then you are not going to be able to exercise any kind of moral or ethical choice, right? And that is so important today, the world that we see today. And what else is education for, right? Helping children be their best selves, also to create the best kind of world that's possible. So the world that we see today, I think a lot of the problem comes from the fact of loss of autonomy, right? But I don't want to shift the focus onto that, but to bring it back to children and education, to say that education should, at its heart, have the ability, right, the skill, the wherewithal to create autonomy in children. And autonomy is possible by allowing children to make their own choices, no matter how young they are, under supervision and so on, to understand consequences, to help clean up with them, or whatever those consequences are, just getting your hands messy or whatever, and also to be able to say no and to choose differently, right? These are, I think, this especially, that is very important to start at a very early age. And this is something that I feel schools, in the way that they are structured, because they require all children sometimes to be doing the exact same thing, the exact same manner, and methodology and syllabus and completion becomes so much more important. What is lost is autonomy. A child's ability to say, no, I don't want to do this today and I want to do something else, is completely, it's not heard in the desire of the teacher, the school, the institution, parents, etc., to make sure that the child does something that they think is important for the child, right? Now, of course, we know better, and I'm not saying children should necessarily decide, to drive a car or to go where they want to. Nothing as ridiculous as that, but to simply encourage at their level and at their age the ability to dissent, to say no, and to not be in a state of over-dependence on the other so much, right, that they can have the power to choose for themselves, to say no, to disagree, and to create and pursue what they wish to. And I think if we start this very early on, and this is what I feel unschooling allows us to do, it allows us to raise children who are not afraid to say no, who are not afraid to say yes when they know their mind. That means if I want to do French at age 5 or 6, I want to learn a language, let's say, for hours together, and then I don't want to do anything else. I want to play or roam the garden. then they should be able to say yes, and that should be respected, right? The joys and of what this brings tomorrow, it's not an immediate thing. It can look very messy in the immediate state. It can look like, oh, maybe they're not doing enough and so on, but who decides what's enough, right? That's the other aspect that I will come to. But I just wanted to speak, one, about love and the parents' right to decide for their child what is good, what is not, which often, schools can take away, I think, because of the way the structure is designed, top down. Sometimes parents also use schools as a way to push children to do things that children are not ready to do or not interested in doing. And all of that bringing us to this fundamental question of autonomy. I chose unschooling, and I recommend unschooling, and you can unschool in a school as well, right? Educators can do this anywhere. You can do it in the university as well, right? We just do it in this way by not going for formal education and just learning through life. But it can be done in any institution as well, because it's a way of doing things, and at the heart of it is the idea of autonomy. We are very scared, I feel, as a society, or as even societies around the world, to encourage autonomy, and especially among children and young people. And there is a reason for this, because it's about power. It's about those who have more power and wanting to hold on to it. And encouraging autonomy would mean that boat would be rocked, that you would not have children wanting to sign up for, let's say corporate jobs or factories or industries or whatever. You would not create any more workers who would supply into the supply chain of the kind of goods and products and services that those who have power over the economy actually want for themselves. That's a wonderful thing, because education should not be about supplying to the global workforce, right? It should be about finding your true calling and being able to be your most beautiful, best, ethical, sound self in such a way that you may create a better world for yourself and everyone who is in it. So that would be my first talk on why I unschool, especially because of the autonomy that unschooling encourages. So if you as educators or parents can include that, if it's messy, hearing a child say no, hearing them want to choose something for themselves which you had not planned or structured, for instance, right? But through dialogue, talk, and through love, it's possible. And if they can start that very early, which is what unschooling is all about, right? As I said, we're in a coffee shop in the middle of the day. My daughter is doing some puzzles and games and so on at her table, eating something that she and I have chosen together. We talked about the nutrition values. We talked about what book she should carry with her. We had there was friction, when that was, and then we talked about why there was friction and so on, and then we resolved that, right? These are all things that prepare children to, I think, hold on to their true selves in the world that's constantly telling them to be something that they're not, right? So if you truly love your children, I think allowing them that autonomy is very important. And I think unschooling is a way of learning which encourages that to begin with. So that's the first. I want to do an ABCD of unschooling, and A is for autonomy. Thank you for listening. I hope you will also enjoy the BCDE XYZ of unschooling.